The cafe was quiet, elegant, and sunlit, a place Morrison had carefully chosen. Not too loud, not too crowded. A soft jazz tune hummed through the air, and the smell of cinnamon and espresso lingered like warmth. He arrived early, of course. Morrison sat near the window, his fingers loosely clasped, glancing outside every few seconds. It had been years since he'd felt this strange, anxious twist in his stomach, this ache of waiting for something he had once believed he'd never have. Then, the glass door opened. Jade stepped in, dressed simply, head held high, shoulders tense, but not unwilling. He spotted Morrison immediately and walked over with slow, careful steps. "Hey," Jade said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming," Morrison replied, trying not to sound too relieved. A waitress approached. Morrison gestured for Jade to order first. "Hot chocolate," Jade said, "with cream and cinnamon on top." Morrison blinked. "That's how your mother liked it too." For a brief second, Jade paused, then gave the faintest smile and looked away. "Yeah, I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Not tense, just full. The drinks arrived. Morrison took a sip of his tea while watching Jade quietly stir the cinnamon into the frothy top of his chocolate. "So," Morrison said gently, "how's the garage job going?" Jade shrugged. "It's fine. Long hours, short pay, but it's honest work. I get to touch machines, figure out how they breathe." "You make it sound poetic," Morrison said with a smile. "I guess it is," Jade replied, finally meeting his eyes. "That's why I chose engineering. I've always been fascinated with how things work, cars, engines. The idea that something mechanical can be taken apart and rebuilt better. That's always stuck with me." Morrison leaned in, interested. "Is that what you studied?" Jade nodded. "I was studying mechanical engineering. Got into a good school, too." "Then, why'd you stop?" Morrison asked softly, already suspecting the answer. Jade looked down at his cup for a long time before answering. "Money," he said bluntly. "I had a scholarship. It covered tuition, but rent, feeding, transport, that was on me. I was working after lectures every weekend. At first it was fine. Then I had to choose between classes and shifts. I chose survival." Morrison's throat tightened. "Why didn't you say anything? Ask for help?" Jade's eyes hardened, not with anger but with truth. "Ask who? You? I didn't even know where you were. And Mum, she was already doing too much, carrying everything on her back. She kept saying one thing over and over. Don't follow the crowd, follow your calling." He swallowed hard, blinking back tears that had suddenly crept into his eyes. "She believed in me more than anyone ever has. She said even if the world didn't get me, she did. And that was enough." He wiped his cheek quickly, as if embarrassed by the emotion. "She told me if I ever had to choose between being rich and being fulfilled, I should always choose peace. I held on to that, even when things got bad." Morrison was silent, absorbing every word. His fingers curled around his teacup as he fought the urge to reach out, afraid he might break whatever fragile thing was forming between them. "You're incredible," Morrison finally said, voice husky. "She would be proud. She is proud. And for what it's worth, so am I." Jade looked at him, not with warmth, but with something close to understanding. He gave a slight nod. "I didn't study finance like you," Jade added. "Didn't want to chase money. I wanted to build, to fix, to create things that outlive me." Morrison smiled sadly. "And I spent my life building things to prove I belonged, while losing the only people who ever made me feel like I already did." The silence that followed was thick with emotion, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like healing, like the beginning of something long overdue. Jade stared into his cup for a moment, stirring what was left of the foam. His voice broke the quiet again, calm but pointed. "But why finance?" he asked, You don't seem like someone who loved numbers growing up. Was it always about money? Morrison exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting to the cafe window where the streetlights flickered across the glass. He leaned back in his seat, his shoulders sinking a little, as if the question had reached deeper than expected. No, he admitted. I didn't grow up dreaming about hedge funds and portfolios. I wasn't the smartest in school either, but I grew up watching my mother pawn her jewelry to pay rent, watching my father walk out and never return. I remember what it felt like to be invisible. He paused. Money. Money gave me a voice, he continued. It gave me presence. It made people pick up my calls, listen to my opinions. It made me matter. Jade said nothing. He just listened, his face unreadable. Morrison's voice softened, thick with reflection. I chose finance because I thought if I could understand the system, I could beat it. I thought I could protect myself from the helplessness I grew up in. And somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that if I became powerful enough, Victoria would still be there, waiting. A brief silence settled between them again. The truth hung in the air, raw, heavy, and unvarnished. She didn't care about that, Jade said quietly. Power, money, none of it. Morrison nodded slowly. I know that now, but back then, I didn't know how to love without proving I was worthy of it. He gave a hollow laugh, and in trying to become everything for her, I became nothing to her. Jade looked at him for a long moment. The air between them felt fuller now, like years of buried truth were finally rising to the surface. She always said people chase gold when peace is right in front of them, Jade murmured. Morrison smiled faintly, his eyes glassy. She was right. They both sat back, the noise of the cafe fading once again into the background. For the first time, it didn't feel like they were on opposite sides of a table. It felt like they were beginning. Jade's voice broke through the silence, low but firm. Did you ever try to find her? The question hit Morrison like a slap to the chest. His breath caught in his throat as he stared into his cup, unable to speak for a moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I did, he said quietly. After I left for that scholarship program, everything happened so fast. I was drowning in school, networking, trying to prove myself. But 2 years in, I came back to Nigeria for a quick business conference, and I looked for her. Jade looked up, his brows knitting slightly. I found her, Morrison said, his voice growing distant, like he was watching the memory from far away. She was living in Abeokuta at the time. We only spent 2 nights together. It was short, rushed, but it felt like home again. I told myself I'd stay in touch, that this time would be different. He gave a bitter smile. But the moment I flew back to London, everything changed. The calls got fewer. Her letters stopped. I'd message and hear nothing for weeks, then months. Eventually, nothing at all. He swallowed hard, his fingers curling into fists on the table. I didn't know she was pregnant, Jade. I didn't know she was carrying you. If I had even the slightest idea. He trailed off, shaking his head, the words refusing to come out. Across from him, Jade sat still, trying to process everything. She never really talked about you, he said after a pause. I knew your name. I knew something happened, but she never made you sound like a bad person, just someone who wasn't there. Morrison's chest tightened. Because I wasn't. That's the painful truth. He looked down, his voice breaking. I regret it. Every single day. I should have done more. I should have followed up, come back, demanded answers. But I was stupid. I thought I had time. I thought my success would be the bridge that brought us back together. His voice cracked as he met Jade's gaze. I didn't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But if there's anything I wish more than anything, it's that I could go back and do it all over. I would never have let her go. Never. Jade exhaled slowly, fingers drumming lightly on his cup. "I don't even know what to do with all of this," he said truthfully. "It's a lot." Morrison nodded. "You don't have to do anything, we just take it one step at a time. No pressure." Jade looked at him again, eyes more thoughtful than cold this time. After a moment, he nodded, just once. "Okay." They sat there, side by side at that cafe table, in silence. But it wasn't the bitter, distant kind anymore. It was a silence that held something new, something fragile, understanding. And for the first time in years, Morrison didn't feel like a man haunted by the past. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to move forward. The aroma of grilled peppers and seasoned chicken filled Morrison's penthouse as he placed the final plate on the table. The lights were dimmed just enough to make the space feel warm, intimate, far from the cold, glossy image the world had of him. He'd spent nearly 3 hours preparing the meal himself, his way of showing effort, of proving he didn't want to buy his son's trust. He wanted to earn it. The doorbell rang right on time. Morrison opened the door to find Jade standing there in a faded hoodie and jeans. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "You cooked?" Jade asked as he stepped in, catching the scent of the food almost immediately. Morrison smirked. "Surprised?" Jade looked around the apartment, taking in the soft lighting, the curated art, the skyline view that stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. "A little," he said. "This place is serious. You cook in here, or just pose for magazine covers? Tonight?" "I cooked," Morrison replied, leading him toward the dining area. The table was already set. 2 plates, glasses of Zobo, and a large ceramic bowl of jollof rice with grilled chicken and fried plantain. Jade raised an eyebrow as he took a seat. "Okay," he said, half impressed. "Didn't think you had this in you." "Figured I'd surprise you," Morrison said, settling across from him. As they began eating, the conversation was light. They talked about the food, debated which state made the best jollof, and laughed over Morrison's confession that he once burned instant noodles in university. Then it shifted. Naturally. Jade leaned back, chewing slowly, his tone more relaxed now. "Mum used to do this thing where she'd force me to wear a suit once a month, even when we had nowhere to go. Said she was preparing me for greatness." Morrison chuckled. "That sounds like Victoria. She even gave me speeches to practice. I was like 10. And she'd be like, 'Now say it again, but this time imagine you're in front of a boardroom.'" Morrison smiled, picturing it easily. "She always had the vision." "She did," Jade said, quieter now. "Even when we had nothing, she made everything feel like a stepping stone, not a wall." There was a pause as Morrison took that in, letting it sit between them. "So what's the plan now?" he asked gently. "Garage forever?" Jade shook his head. "Number. It's just where I am right now. It pays bills, teaches me discipline, but I want more. I want to own my own auto tech business, something fresh, Nigerian-made, electric-powered. A brand." Morrison's eyes lit up. "You've thought this through." "Every day," Jade said. "Mum taught me that the dream doesn't need permission. She always said, don't wait around for the world to give you a seat. Build your own damn table. So yeah, even with you here now, I'm still going to do things my way. I'm not the type to expect anything from anyone. That's how she raised me." Morrison nodded slowly, proud, but pained all at once. "I can see that, and I respect it. But have you thought about going back to school, just to finish what you started?" Jade hesitated for a second, stirring his Zobo with the tip of his straw. "If the opportunity shows up again," he said finally, "I'll take it. I miss it, learning, building things in theory, seeing how far I can stretch an idea, but I won't beg life for second chances. If it comes, I'll grab it. If it doesn't, I'll still find a way." Morrison leaned back, watching him closely. You've grown into exactly the kind of man your mother would be proud of." Jade looked at him, his face unreadable for a moment, then gave a subtle nod. "Yeah, I think she'd be proud." And with that, the silence that settled between them didn't feel awkward or heavy. It felt earned. It felt like something real had finally begun. But then, as they were finishing dessert, Jade leaned back in his chair and looked at Morrison seriously. "So what now?" he asked. Morrison set down his fork, knowing exactly what the question meant. He didn't rush the response. "That's up to you," he said honestly. "I'm not here to force anything. We can take it at your pace." Jade nodded slowly, staring down at the almost empty plate before looking up again. "I don't really know how to do this, the whole father-son thing," he said. "It was just me and Mum. That's all I ever knew." Morrison swallowed hard. "We don't have to figure it all out at once. We can just be in each other's lives, however that feels right." Jade exhaled, a slow breath through his nose. "I think I'd like that." A small smile curved Morrison's lips, a quiet relief blooming in his chest. "Me too." Jade's eyes wandered around the apartment again, taking in the soft lighting and skyline view one more time. "You know, I used to wonder what my father was like, if he was just some guy who disappeared, a deadbeat, or someone who just didn't care." He looked back at Morrison, eyes clear but calm. "You're not what I expected." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "No?" Jade smirked faintly. "Nah. I pictured some stuck-up old rich guy with no personality." Morrison laughed. "Well, I'm definitely rich, but I'd like to think there's at least some personality in here somewhere." Jade chuckled. "Yeah, you're all right." It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a tearful reunion speech. But in that moment, it was enough. From the casual cafe near Surulere where they first had tea together, to quiet dinners in Morrison's apartment. Sometimes they'd walk through Freedom Park or down the Lekki shoreline just talking. Other times they didn't need to say much at all. The silence between them had grown comfortable. Morrison had never imagined becoming a father like this, starting late, learning slowly. But every shared moment mattered more than anything money had ever bought him. And still, in the back of his mind, there was that small, persistent fear that one misstep could send Jade pulling away again. So he never pushed. He let Jade lead. As they finished the last bites of dinner, the soft clatter of cutlery slowed, and a stillness settled in Morrison's apartment. The mood was calm, unlike the first few awkward meals they had shared. Tonight felt easier, like they were slowly finding a rhythm. Morrison poured the last of the Zobo into Jade's glass, his movements unhurried. Jade leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes scanning the skyline through the large windows before his voice cut through the quiet. "I've been thinking of going to visit Mum's grave," he said simply, his tone casual but sincere. "It's been a while." Morrison looked up from his plate, nodding gently. "That's fair." Jade nodded. "I used to go more often, but with work and everything, I just haven't in a long time." There was no heaviness in his voice, just honesty. But Morrison could still feel the subtle ache behind it. "That's a good thing to do," Morrison said, his voice soft, careful not to overstep. "When were you thinking of going?" Jade shrugged. "Maybe sometime this week. I don't have a specific day. I just feel like it's time." Morrison hesitated for a moment. Then, gently, "Would you mind if I came with you?" Jade looked at him, thoughtful, not guarded, just taking in the question. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I'd be okay with that." Morrison gave a small, respectful nod. "Thank you. I'd really like to." There wasn't much more to say after that. The silence returned, but it didn't feel strange or uncomfortable. It felt necessary, like something important had been acknowledged. Morrison watched his son from across the table, this young man who had grown up without him, who was letting him in now, bit by bit. He didn't need grand declarations or over-explaining, just presence. And tonight, that was enough. It was a cool Wednesday evening, the sky draped in soft gray as faint clouds moved lazily above Lagos. The air carried that quiet chill that came just before nightfall, heavy, calm, and still. The cemetery was nearly empty, save for the two of them walking side by side down the winding gravel path. Jade led the way, his steps slow but certain. Morrison followed without a word, the crunch of their shoes against the stones the only sound between them. When they reached the grave, Jade stopped. The headstone stood where it always had, modest and clean. The name etched across it was one Morrison had repeated in his thoughts 1,000 times: Victoria Peterson. Beneath it, a simple line: loved deeply, missed forever. Jade stood there for a moment, hands buried in the pocket of his hoodie, eyes locked on the stone. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. "It's me." His voice was steady, but only just. Morrison stood a few steps behind, giving him space, watching silently. "I know it's been a while," Jade continued, eyes never leaving the inscription. "But I never forgot you, not for a day." He knelt slowly, brushing a few fallen leaves away from the edge of the grave. "I miss you more than I know how to explain," he murmured. "There were nights I'd sit in the dark and just cry into my pillow, wishing you were still here. I kept trying to be strong because that's what you taught me. But some days I wasn't. I guess I never really stopped being your baby. I outgrew my clothes, but not you." His lips trembled slightly, and he took a breath to steady himself. "I found him, Mum," he said after a long pause. "My dad." Morrison's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't know what to expect. Everyone always told me things, hinted at stories. But he's not what they said he was. He's different. He's trying. He listens. He remembers you." Jade reached out and ran his fingers over her name, slowly, gently. "And he loved you. He really did. You didn't talk much about him, but I see it now. I see it in how he looks at me, in the way he talks about you like you still matter, like you never stopped." Morrison swallowed hard, blinking quickly as the sting rose in his eyes. Jade looked up at him now, seeing it, his glassy stare, the tight set of his jaw, the way his fingers flexed at his sides like he was holding something back. "Do you want to say something?" Jade asked, voice soft. Morrison stepped forward, slowly. He looked down at Victoria's grave, his chest rising and falling with every silent breath. "Hi, Vicky," he said, his voice thick. "I don't even know where to begin." He paused, pressing his lips together for a moment before continuing. "I was a fool. I thought chasing success would bring us back together somehow. I kept thinking, if I built something big enough, loud enough, you'd hear me. I didn't know I'd already lost you." A tear slipped down his cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. "You gave me the best part of my life. You gave me a son who amazes me every day." He turned his head slightly, looking at Jade with pride in his eyes. "You raised him well. He's independent, smart, stubborn like you," Morrison said, smiling faintly. "And brave. So damn brave." Jade looked down, trying not to tear up himself, but his throat felt tight. "I just hope you're at peace," Morrison whispered, looking back at the grave. "And I hope somehow, you know I'm trying to be the man you always wanted me to be." Silence fell again, but it was tender, not hollow. Jade stood and dusted off his jeans. He gave one last glance at the grave before shifting his gaze to Morrison. "You really meant all of that?" he asked, not accusing, just needing to be sure. Morrison looked him dead in the eye. Every word. And somehow, between the quiet breeze and the fading light, something unspoken passed between them. Respect. recognition, maybe even the beginning of trust. The silence between them lingered as they walked back to the car, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind that said more than words could. A quiet understanding had passed between them at that graveside, something that didn't need to be explained. As they settled into the car, Jade glanced sideways at Morrison, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "You hungry?" he asked. "There's this pizza joint not far from here. Mum used to take me there every time I got good grades. They make the best deep dish in Lagos, hands down." Morrison's face lit up with genuine ease. "Lead the way," he said. "Sounds like the perfect plan." As they drove through the quiet evening streets of Lagos, headlights sweeping past sleepy shops and peppered streetlights, something felt undeniably different. Not just in the world around them, but between them. The invisible walls that once stood tall and unshakable had started to fall, brick by brick. What had begun as tension, hesitation, and guarded words had now softened into something else, something close to connection. For the first time, Morrison wasn't just driving beside his son, he was being seen by him, accepted. And that, more than anything else, stirred something deep inside him. Later that night, as Morrison sat alone in his home office overlooking the Lagos skyline, the city lights blinking like stars beneath him, he found himself lost in thought. Not over the next deal, not about the next expansion, but about Jade. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, and let the quiet settle around him. In all his years of building, acquiring, and climbing, he had never prepared for this fatherhood. Not this late, not this raw. And yet, here he was, staring out at the world, not as a mogul, but as a man rediscovering something he thought he'd lost long ago. Purpose. Jade had carved his way into his life, without force, without expectation. And despite the rocky start, the misunderstandings, the years lost in silence, they had built something real, something that couldn't be bought or bartered. It wasn't just about making peace with the past anymore. It was about the future they were slowly, carefully choosing to create. Together. The house stood quietly at the end of a narrow street in Ijebu-Ode, its walls aged with time, its iron gate rusted at the corners. The compound was modest, the kind where memories seemed to linger in the air like the scent of fried plantain. Morrison stood beside Jade in silence, hands loosely clasped in front of him, his chest rising and falling slowly. It had been years since he was last here. That day, he wasn't proud of. He had arrived like a storm, furious, confused, demanding answers. He remembered the fear in their eyes, the tension in the room, and the painful moment someone finally told him, "Victoria is gone." But this time, it was Jade who led the way. The door opened slowly. An elderly woman stood in the threshold, her eyes sharp beneath the wrinkles of time. Her scarf was neatly tied, her gown simple but clean, her back slightly bent from years of service as a nurse, a mother, a woman who had seen too much. Jade stepped forward gently. "Grandma, good evening." She looked at him, nodded slowly. Her eyes then drifted toward Morrison, cold, unwelcoming, unreadable. "Mama," Jade said softly, "please. I brought him because I believe he deserves to hear you, to hear the truth. He's not here to fight." Her eyes didn't leave Morrison for a long moment. She studied him the way only a mother could, through the lens of everything her daughter went through. And then finally, she stepped aside. "You want to sit, she said. "But don't think your presence here erases what happened." They entered the living room. Old photo frames lined the walls. One of them was a younger Victoria, wearing her nursing school uniform, her smile wide and bright. Morrison's eyes locked on it like a man seeing her again for the first time. Victoria's mother, Mama Grace, sat down slowly in her armchair, the same one she had used to rock Jade as a baby. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of grief that had fermented over time. "She loved you," she began, her eyes not meeting his yet. "That girl, she put you before everything, even herself." Morrison looked down, his throat tight. "I warned her," Mama Grace continued. "I told her, that boy will leave again. His world is not your world. But she had already given her heart to you. She defended you, even when you didn't deserve it. She would sit here every night writing letters, making calls that went unanswered." Jade looked down, pressing his lips together, jaw clenched as he listened. "I told her to move on," Mama Grace said, her voice rising slightly. "Told her to stop waiting. But when someone close to us, someone we trusted, came and told her you were married, living large abroad, that you never planned to return, that broke her." Morrison's head jerked up, stunned. "Married?" he whispered. Mama Grace finally met his eyes, and tears gathered in hers. "Yes, that was the lie she was told, and they didn't just say it with words. They brought pictures, wedding pictures, told her it was your 3rd-year anniversary, that you had been married for 3 years and were celebrating in style. She held those photos in her hands and cried all night. She didn't say anything, just stared at them. She wiped her face, but the tears didn't stop. "My Victoria," she sobbed softly. "She deserved more. Not this pain, not this silence, not to die carrying questions she never had answers to." Morrison was frozen in place. The breath in his chest felt sharp. The weight of what she said crushed down on him. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I didn't know she was told that. If I had—" "I know," Mama Grace cut in, her voice breaking. "But now you do." Then she added, her voice softer now as her eyes drifted toward the floor. "After you came back asking, searching for her, after you walked in that day full of fire, desperate to find her, we knew. We knew then that what she heard was a lie, but by then, she was already gone." Jade reached across and held her hand. "Grandma, he didn't come here to excuse himself. He came to listen." She looked at her grandson, so much of Victoria in his face, and slowly nodded. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I let him in." Her shoulders shook as fresh grief washed over her, not loud, but deep. Morrison moved slowly from his chair, kneeling quietly beside her. "I failed her," he said, voice cracking. "But I will never fail you or Jade, not again." She didn't speak, but for the first time, she didn't pull away. The room stayed silent, heavy, sacred, and for the first time, not even the pain could erase the truth. Victoria had loved, had lost, and now, finally, someone was here to honor that love, not with apologies, but with presence. Morrison sat still on the floor beside Mama Grace, his thoughts spinning. The pain in his chest was heavier now, not just from guilt, but from unanswered questions that had haunted him for years. He blinked slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "Then why—" He paused, trying to hold his voice steady. "Why did she let me in? That day I came to see her in Abeokuta." Mama Grace looked at him, her eyes glistening. She leaned back in the armchair, as if bracing herself for what she was about to say. "She had already accepted her fate," she said. "Victoria knew you no longer belonged to her world, not the way you once did. She'd been fed lies for too long, and by the time you came back, she had already decided." Morrison's brow furrowed, unsure. "She loved you. God knows she did," Mama Grace continued, her voice trembling. "But she couldn't bring herself to believe anything else. She had buried her hopes, and her heart with it. But when she saw you again, she didn't hate you. Number that woman still carried you in her spirit. She was just too tired to start over." Morrison dropped his gaze, jaw tight. "She wanted a part of you," Mama Grace whispered. "Even if she couldn't have all of you. That was the child." Jade's head tilted slightly. His breath caught, She told me one night, "That child is my peace," Mama Grace said, her voice cracking. She said, "If I can't be with him, I want to have the best part of him, the part that still carries his eyes, his mind, his laughter. That will be enough for me." Morrison shut his eyes. The words cut deeper than any wound. "She spent the rest of her life loving one man," Mama Grace added painfully. "She didn't have more love to give anyone else. She poured everything into that boy." She reached over, gently touching Jade's hand. He was her beginning and her end. Mama Grace paused for a moment, her voice softening into a whisper. "She made a promise, Morrison, that no matter what, she would never stand in the way of your happiness. She said if it wasn't her, if you had chosen someone else, as long as you were happy, truly happy, then she was too." Morrison looked stunned. She said, "If he found joy, even if not with me, I'll accept it. All I've ever wanted is his happiness." The room fell into heavy silence. "She lived with quiet strength," Mama Grace said after a moment. "She worked night shifts, raised him alone, never cursed your name, never spread bitterness, but she carried pain, and the body can only take so much before it gives in." She looked at Morrison now, direct, raw. That heart attack, it didn't come out of nowhere. She was tired. She had given everything she had. And in her final weeks, she told me, "Someday, somehow, fate will bring them together, my son and his father. It may not be perfect, but love always finds its way." Tears rolled down Morrison's cheek, falling freely now. "She believed in you too," Mama Grace whispered, "even when she stopped believing in herself." Jade sat there in silence, not looking at either of them. His fists clenched slightly, but his face was calm. It wasn't new pain. It was the old kind, the one that sits with you and becomes part of your breath. Morrison turned to look at him, broken but full of awe. "She gave everything," he murmured, "and I never knew." Mama Grace nodded. "You know now." The air in the room was thick with grief, love, regret, and revelation. This wasn't just about loss. It was about understanding the kind of strength that suffers in silence and the kind of love that asks for nothing in return. And now, that love had finally been heard. The air in the room had shifted. It was no longer heavy with blame or sorrow. It was tender, sacred, a space where truth had been spoken, where hearts had been broken open and bled bare. But now came the mending. Morrison wiped the tears from his eyes and slowly reached for Mama Grace's hand. She didn't pull away this time. Her aged fingers folded into his, her eyes still glassy but calm. "I'm sorry," Morrison said, voice low but steady, "for not coming sooner, for not being there, for letting silence speak louder than love. I'm so sorry." Mama Grace gave a quiet nod, her grip tightening gently. "I won't lie to you and say I've let it all go," she said, her voice honest. "But I believe in healing, and I believe Victoria would want that." Jade stood up quietly and walked toward the photo of his mother on the shelf. He looked at it for a long time before turning back to them. "She always said love means nothing if it doesn't come with understanding," he said. "I think she'd be proud of today." Mama Grace let out a deep breath and looked at them both. Then, folding her hands slowly in her lap, she closed her eyes and began to pray aloud. "Lord, thank you for the truth, for the reunion, for the chance to heal what time and lies tried to destroy. We hand this pain over to you. We release the anger, the regret, the shame. Fill this home with peace. Let Victoria's memory remain a blessing. Let her son walk in the light. And let this man, this father, walk in redemption." "Amen," Jade whispered. "Amen," Morrison echoed, a tear slipping down again, this time softer, cleansing. They sat together a while longer. No one rushed to leave. There was no need for grand speeches. The air was filled with something richer than words: understanding, grace, and the quiet beauty of being seen, heard, and forgiven. The past had spoken, and love, real, patient love, had answered. The days that followed the truth about Victoria were quiet, but meaningful. Something in the air between Jade and Morrison had shifted, less guarded, more open. The storm of regret and revelation had passed, but its echo lingered in their silences. Now the spaces between them were filled not with distance, but slow, careful steps toward healing. Morrison had found himself doing something he hadn't done in years: cooking from scratch. It wasn't just therapy, it was his way of showing care without needing words. He was good at it, too. Years ago, Victoria had once told him that a man who could season food with patience could season life with grace. It stuck with him more than he admitted. Jade started coming around more, sometimes after work, sometimes just to talk. But their time together always circled back to the kitchen. There, over bubbling pots and sizzling pans, they found rhythm. Morrison would dice with precision. Jade would stir with ease. And between them, a quiet bond brewed stronger than any stew on the stove. That evening, the warm scent of jollof rice mixed with grilled peppered turkey danced through the apartment. Jade was on plantain duty, cutting each slice too thick on purpose just to hear Morrison complain. Laughter came easily now, even in the smallest moments. But Morrison had something planned. He waited until Jade wiped his hands on the kitchen towel and stepped back to taste the rice. Then, casually, Morrison reached over to the side cabinet and pulled out a brown envelope. He placed it silently beside the bowl of peeled onions. "What's that?" Jade asked, brow raised. Morrison didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the pot, lowering the heat before finally turning to face his son. "Open it." Jade frowned but obeyed. He slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a set of crisp papers. He scanned the top page, then paused. His heart stopped. His name was printed clearly across a university readmission form: Faculty, Engineering. Jade blinked, confused. "Wait, this is..." "Yes," Morrison said, his voice calm but thick with emotion. "It's your school, your course, your dream." Jade looked up, mouth slightly open. "How?" "I pulled a few strings," Morrison said with a small smile. "The dean remembered your records. Everything's arranged. All you need to do is sign and return it. You're going back, son." Jade stared at the document again, trying to make sense of the wave of emotion rising in his chest. His lips trembled slightly. His hands shook. For a second, the kitchen blurred. "I didn't want to ask you," he muttered. "I didn't want it to feel like I needed saving." Morrison stepped forward. "You didn't ask. I just listened. And I saw a brilliant young man giving everything he had to survive when all he really needed was a chance." Jade swallowed hard. "You really believe I can do this?" "With my whole heart," Morrison replied. "And more importantly, your mother believed it first." That hit deeper than Morrison expected. Jade nodded slowly, the tears in his eyes finally spilling over as he whispered, "Thank you." Morrison placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, son. Thank you for not shutting me out." The rice was nearly burning, but neither of them noticed. That night, the kitchen was filled with something richer than food: hope. A father giving back what life had stolen. A son finally stepping into the future that once felt too far away. No words could describe what they were building now, but it smelled like peace, and it tasted like a second chance. 2 years later, Morrison Bruce stood behind the podium of a towering glass stage, the Lagos skyline glinting behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. The hall was packed with elite investors, world-class engineers, and some of the biggest names in international development. A 3-day global tech and infrastructure summit, Morrison's firm was hosting it. And as always, He was the star speaker. He was dressed sharp, every word measured, every gesture deliberate. But behind that cool exterior was a man who had changed, mellowed, deepened. Success used to be about legacy and reputation. Now it meant something more. He clicked through the final slide on the projector and smiled. "And that," Morrison said, turning to the audience, "is how we scale impact, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation." Just then, his phone buzzed in the inside pocket of his blazer. He almost ignored it. He was still mid-session. But when he pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, a rare, boyish smile crept across his face. Jade, video call. He raised a finger to the audience, chuckling. "Gentlemen, ladies, allow me a brief moment. This call might be more groundbreaking than the last 2 hours of slides." A few people laughed politely. The tech team saw the cue and, without needing instruction, mirrored the call on the giant LED screen behind Morrison. And there he was, Jade Bruce, bright-eyed, confident, beaming from a studio apartment in Europe. Behind him were scattered drawings, technical blueprints, and a massive model engine on a desk. His face lit up the screen. "Dad, it's official," he said, breathless with excitement. Morrison raised an eyebrow, his heart already pounding. "Official? I won!" Jade shouted. "I just got the email, first place, the International Innovation Challenge, my sustainable engine design. They picked it!" There was a collective gasp from the audience. Jade went on, eyes shining. "And guess what? I've been offered a full scholarship to complete my master's, Germany. They're flying me out next month. A full program, research funding, everything. Dad, I did it!" The room erupted into applause. CEOs stood from their chairs. Partners clapped, exchanging impressed glances. Cameras turned to Morrison, who stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed. He cleared his throat and looked back at the audience, his eyes glassy. "That's my son," he said proudly. 2 years ago, he walked back into my life. Today, he's walking into the future." Jade laughed on the screen. "No handouts, no shortcuts. I wanted to do it my way. You just gave me the tools." Morrison nodded slowly. "You did more than I ever could have dreamed, son. You've made your mother proud." A hush fell over the room for a moment at the mention of Victoria. Even from the screen, Jade's smile softened. "Every blueprint," he said, "has a part of her in it." The applause resumed, louder this time. Morrison stepped back from the mic, letting the moment breathe, letting his pride rise with it. For years, he had lived for numbers, but today, he had become the greatest version of himself. A father. To a world changer. You can build empires, sign million-dollar deals, fly private jets across continents. But if your heart is full of regret and your relationships are buried under years of silence, then what have you really gained? Morrison Bruce had everything the world said mattered: wealth, power, prestige. Yet what broke him open, what gave him the most peace, wasn't found in a boardroom or bank balance. It was the sound of his son's voice saying, "Dad, I did it." This story is a reminder that time is fleeting and healing starts with presence. Don't wait until it's too late to show up for the people you love. Be bold enough to seek forgiveness. Be humble enough to receive it. And when life gives you a second chance, take it with both hands, because legacy is not just about what you leave behind. It's about who you lift while you're still here. Victoria's journey teaches us something that far too many people only learn when it's too late. Love alone is not enough if communication is absent. She loved Morrison, fiercely, faithfully, but she let lies plant seeds of doubt in the silence between them. She believed the wrong voices because the right one never reached her again. She accepted heartbreak instead of clarity, and in her quiet sacrifice, she chose to give her son a father's legacy, even if it meant never seeing the man she loved again. But what if they had just spoken? What if one honest conversation had replaced the silence? In love, in family, in friendship, we owe each other clarity. If something hurts, say it. If you're unsure, ask. If you still care, show it. So many relationships fade not because love disappeared, but because assumptions and silence stood in its place. Let Victoria's journey be a mirror, a reminder that emotions are not meant to be swallowed forever. Don't let pride, fear, or ego stop you from saying the words that can save something sacred. Love is a language, but it must be spoken. If this story touched your heart, made you reflect, or brought tears to your eyes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more emotionally rich and powerful stories coming your way. And if you'd love to support the channel and show appreciation for the work, consider dropping a super thanks. Your support means the world, and it helps us continue to share stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all of what truly matters. Subscribe, like, comment. And most of all, never underestimate the power of love, redemption, and a second chance.